Yeah, so this is moral proximity in the territorial imperative. In European Journal of Political Theory, it was a part of the symposium on Shahar's The Shifting Border by Patti Tamara Lenard, out of Ottawa. So, as always, feel free to ask questions. If you're watching this live, let me know. If you're seeing this later on the YouTubes, you can always leave a comment. All right, so here we go. Ayelet Shahar's The Shifting Border, and I apologize for how I'm saying your name. I have no idea how to say anything other than very plain Jane in English. Ayelet Shahar's The Shifting Border articulates the multiple ways in which the border between states is no longer, in any real sense, at the border. As the title tells us, the border has shifted and now operates not only at physical borders, but also inside of them and at far-flung locations away from them. Borders are ever more pervasive in our lives and are acting more than ever to render movement of the most vulnerable of global citizens dangerous. Shahar offers us two concrete proposals for combating the danger posed by the shifting border, especially to those crossing borders in search of safety, both of which invite us to take on the fact of the shifting border and, as it were, to take advantage of it. One proposal suggests that human rights follow the border so that whatever agent has effective control of the space in which a migrant finds herself is also responsible for protecting her human rights. The result will be that instances of protection will begin whenever and wherever such authority is implemented under the color of law. A second proposal, which forms the basis of my commentary below, asks that states take seriously the possibility of digging new channels for migrants seeking protection rather than leaving these migrants to rely exclusively on the act of touching base. In responding to this second proposal, I make two proposals of my own, friendly additions really, that stem from Shahar's analysis. One, her analysis offers us the resources we need in order to expand not only the channels available to migrants for seeking protection, but also our sense of who should be involved in controlling administration, and two, expanding the who that is involved in admission gives meaning to the concept of moral proximity, which can help to overcome the territorial imperative that dominates the rules governing international migration, that is, the imperative that protection travels with the physical access to territory only. Alright, so here, this is interesting. I mean, of course, this is a commentary on a book, which I haven't read, but, number one is, the first one was, whenever someone's in your area, you have to be responsible for their human rights, and which the author is not going to talk about. The second one is that digging new channels for migrants seeking protection. This is interesting. Is this because when we had there's something called the Underground Railroad, which was get ads back on. The Underground Railroad was this series of ways for slaves back when we had slavery here in the United States, for slaves in the South to move to the North where they would where slavery was not the law. So the Underground Railroad would take people from outside of from the slave area to the non-slave area. So this is the idea of making new channels. Now I know there's internet programs called Tor is one of them, the Onion Router, and basically that is a secure browser that allows you to communicate and surf the web without being tracked. And so that would be a new channel for people to seek protection, is via the internet, via these secure untrackable sort of systems. So I just wonder if that's the way it's going to go, as opposed to actually getting to the place, getting to touching base. But you have to give people new ways to get to safety. So that's interesting. Okay. Expanding who selects migrants for admission. Shahar advises us all to seek new and innovative channels by which migrants, especially the most vulnerable, can achieve safety. In that discussion, Shahar points to a moment in recent Canadian history that I have evaluated in some detail elsewhere: the choice of the Canadian government to respond to the crisis in Syria by committing to rapidly admitting 25,000 Syrian refugees, a feat which it managed in part by having Canadian officials go to refugee camps in Jordan, Turkey, and Lebanon. Their officials conducted the pre-admission interviews screenings necessary for such individuals to gain admission to Canada. These actions served not only to expedite the travel of refugees to Canada, they also did not require that such asylum seekers gain access to Canadian territory in order to have their request for safety considered. This exercise illustrates that it need not always be the case that arriving on it to a territory is the sole way to gain its protection. Yeah, I mean, if you go somewhere and say, look, these people are now under the protection of the Canadian government, I mean, depending where you are, some people, like the Canadian government is relatively powerful in the world. They may not want to piss the Canadian government off. So the fact that like a Canadian official is there to say, look, these people are now our friends and you are not to harm them anymore, that's worth something to people who have less power than the Canadian government. So it's like, but again, you're using the power of the office. Like, I am a Canadian official. Of course, you could impersonate a Canadian official. I do not suggest anyone does this, and then go there and pretend to be Canadian and like protect the people. But yeah. But like, this is one way to actually be the Canadian government and like flex your muscles. You go someplace that doesn't want to piss you off, and you tell them, look, you're to leave these people alone. Okay. In the author's view, the Canadian effort was interesting for a second reason. One key part of the Canadian effort stemmed from what Shahar notes at note 198, namely its private sponsorship of refugee program PSRP. The PSRP has been in operation in Canada formally since 1978, and before that on an informal basis. The program allows Canadian citizens to name specific refugees for admission, so long as they are willing to carry the costs for doing so for 1 year, so long as they are willing and able to support them during the time, that with a wide range of basic integration tasks, including finding accommodation, language education, healthcare, and so on. The willingness of Canadian citizens to take on this work meant that the initial 25,000 commitment turned eventually into nearly 60,000 admitted Syrians. For an assessment of this effort, see these folks, as well as at least 7,000 of the initial 25,000 were privately sponsored by Canadian citizens. Okay, so that's interesting. So it's like the Canadian government will act if Canadian citizens want to act in some sense. So it's not up to the officials. You have to say the people want to do something, and then we will use the power of the Canadian government to then protect people. So, author continues, one standard claim made about the conventional border is that it is, or should be, under the control of a government, the government of a sovereign state in particular, which has the authority to make admission determinations. Whatever one thinks about whether the power to control entry is key to state sovereignty, here I am in agreement with Sarah Fine's observation in her contribution to the volume that it is likely not so obviously a key element of state sovereignty. What private or community sponsorship programs demonstrate is that there is another way to work with the shifting border, and that is to shift authority for admission into the hands of citizens, at least partially. Yeah, I mean, that's something. States are often anxious to prevent refugees from getting to their border for economic reasons. They do not want to bear the costs of supporting refugees as they integrate. A community or private sponsorship model offers citizens the opportunity to carry some of these costs, and some evidence from the Canadian case suggests additionally that privately sponsored refugees contribute to the economy relatively quickly after arrival. A reasonable objection to such a model, which offloads the cost of refugee admissions to citizens, is that the duty to admit and resettle refugees is a state duty. A sponsorship model might turn into a mechanism by which states can avoid carrying their duties out. However, there remain good reasons to adopt a sponsorship option alongside more conventional routes to admission as part of the strategy of responding to the shifting border by accepting some of its parameters. In particular, community sponsorship programs meet Shahar's injunction to expand access to protection and enlarge the pie of actors and stakeholders involved. Okay, so in this case, it's saying, look, who actually governs the border? Is it the state or is it the citizenry? And can we rely on the citizenry to locally enforce, like, we think that person's good and we want that person in, and so I'm taking that person across the border, and once the Canadian says I'm taking this person across the border, the Canadian government does not stop them. Yeah, but again, then how do you limit that? Like, what is this personal connection that you have to know? Like, you have to specifically name the person to do it. And there were lots of weird, not weird, basically terrible stories out of the Middle East when the U.S. and was leaving certain areas, or maybe Afghanistan. I forget what country it was, and people were trying to get out. And like people were making phone calls like over the seas, and like they were just calling random Americans trying to get them to call their political contacts that they didn't have any number for. And then someone would make a phone call and they'd get back to them and they say, okay, you walk to this spot and you do this weird thing and you get the guard's attention, you say these words and they should help you. And so somebody that was like instrumental to saving many American lives was gotten out of the country by some really cockamamie terrible thing, but because someone called, made another call, took the guy's word for it, and then made another call, and the guy went and like, I remember the story was like, go stand in the middle of like some canal, like it was only a few feet deep or something, so like he was like up to his knees or something in the water, and take your shirt off and wave it over your head and get like some random guard's attention and tell him to tell his boss of this, and that got this guy's family out, who had like saved some untold number of U.S. lives. It's like, okay, but it's like that's a or maybe it was Canadian even, I don't remember, but it was like weird things. But like, should that be a formalized mechanism that where you can go talk to someone in the United States or Canada and then get them to just like open the border for you? Interesting question. These are not things I know a lot about, so it's hard for me to judge, but either way, it's interesting that this seems to happen even if it's not formalized. Yeah, 17 frames per second. I do not understand today. What's going on? Anywho, citizens and their role in immigration control. One reason I think that it is important to take seriously the role of citizens in the protection offering framework is that they are taking this role for themselves in multiple situations, and as moral philosophers we need... Hey Valpo, how's it going? Hope you're well today. Yeah, we got the old Aris heart. Thing is a little Aristotle staring at me. Okay. Yeah, I hope you're doing well. What's up? Yeah, and as moral philosophers, we need responses to these actions. Around the world, citizens are coming to the aid of refugees and asylum seekers in the desert between Mexico and the United States, in the Mediterranean Sea, at the many crossings at which African migrants attempt to gain entry to Europe. Worryingly, their actions are increasingly being criminalized. Although they are scattered throughout Shahar's book and not engaged with in a substantive way, the references to citizen humanitarian efforts provide evidence that there is everywhere strong support for refugees and asylum seekers. Shahar acknowledges that these moments are part of the resistance to harsh border control, and she notices that these actors have opened up new spaces for democratic contestation. She notes that the policies of contestation and resistance is on the rise, providing a vital companion and catalyzer for any progressive legal and conceptual change along the lines that she is advocating in her essay. Yeah, this is the thing. We've got problems now, and we have basically been, bifurcating society into like the few that have an awful lot, and everyone else who has almost nothing. And so it's like the people who have a lot really don't want to give it up. They really don't want to give it up. And so they're fighting with everyone else because they're afraid they're going to lose what they have. But it's like the concentration of wealth is bad because there is enough stuff for everybody. But like it's just very hard to organize this. People do not want to lose what they have. And the people that don't have very much, of course, don't want what little that they have to go away either. So it's like there's people who want to help, but then it gets very difficult to figure out what exactly to do. Continuing, in spite of this context of what might be understood as a worldwide uprising of citizens keen on offering humanitarian support for migrants, it is striking to see Shahar's relative pessimism on this front. For example, Shahar points to Jacob Huber's view in his contribution to the volume that the presence of refugees serves to generate solidarity and expresses skepticism of this claim. Moreover, while she notes in passing the initial enthusiasm Germans showed for arriving asylum seekers, the videos were shared widely on social media, she then cites a survey suggesting that nearly half the population, just under or just over depending on the question, reports negative views with respect to Muslims and or asylum seekers. Offering only 2 sentences to those who cheered for arriving Syrians, she devotes several paragraphs to the backlash against minorities and the resultant majority nationalism in Germany. But why? Have those who cheered changed sides? I doubt it. Why not elevate those voices? This elevation is something that I think we should do as moral philosophers. We should move towards thinking of citizens who are asserting themselves in deliberations around the best treatment for asylum seekers, not as resistors who are opening up space for contestation, but rather as legitimate players in global migration management. I think this extinction is consistent with Shahar's overall project, furthermore. Okay, so, yeah, they're gonna be criminalized. Like, they're gonna criminalize helping refugees. I mean, here in the United States, we criminalize helping people waiting online to vote. So it's like helping these people, get food and stuff. That's gonna become criminalized in these other places, and then the people who want to help them are then criminalized. So the author here says basically to argue, look, this is a legitimate way that people enter countries is by having the individual citizens help them come in. It is not the sole responsibility of the government. In some sense, in like U.S. terms, because that's all I really know, it's like this is too much big government governing who comes in and who doesn't. Of course, the government has limited resources, and people are afraid once they get in, they're going to waste all the resources. But generally, the people who waste the resources are not the refugees. I don't think it's usually big businesses getting millions of dollars of handouts. That's where a lot of the waste happens. So, but again, I'm not an expert on these subjects. So, but it's interesting. Like, if you legitimize people bringing other people across the border, then you can't criminalize helping refugees, because that is a legitimate way to help migration, to do migration, not help it. Indeed, the sanctuary movement that Shahar cites in her optimistic mode is just that: sub-state jurisdictions that are engaged in the process of rejecting the idea that states have a monolithic hold on border control. They too are using their resources to combat the idea that there is only one actor with the right to assess power at the borders. So yeah, in U.S. terms, like, the U.S. government has too much power over the border. That's basically it. We have to have a smaller government. Individuals have to bring people across, not the government. They're going to screw it up. Too much bureaucracy, right? Let's do it in, like, you can just rephrase this. But they are not resisting in the sense that they are engaging in civil disobedience of some kind. Rather, they are using their authority to question the exclusive jurisdiction of states to control borders. Their actions as democratic publics manifest a realization of precisely the phenomenon Shahar is proposing as a way to further the quality of the protection offered to those in need by bringing the shifting border under the normative umbrella of regulatory and democratic oversight. The more general point, to connect to the earlier comments about citizens' role in selecting for admission, is to notice again that there are more players at the border, this time citizens operating as members of sub-state jurisdictions. Yeah, I mean, this is the question. Who has legitimacy to control whatever we're calling the border nowadays? But that's interesting. Like I said, this is not my area, but the idea is that citizens can operate without the government permission, and that's a legitimate way to bring someone across a border is interesting. Because usually, like nowadays, everyone's so nervous about things. You want to like have a background check. Like they check people's social media. Have they been writing stuff like crappy on the internet, and they say they're gonna go act on this? I mean, is that really a way to go judge people? I mean, nowadays it is, but I don't know. We're gonna social media is getting a little crapped on at the moment. Apparently, Facebook is laying off a ton of people. Twitter is people are fleeing it. I don't know if people are fleeing it. People say that people are fleeing Twitter because of Elon has made some mistakes in his takeover. yeah, Facebook is crap. Google, I don't know what Google's doing, but they had to get out of the social media market. I wonder. I'm sure Microsoft owns LinkedIn, which is basically a social network for business, but I don't know how well that's going. So yeah. So, I mean, you're on Twitch. Maybe this is the way to go. This is your social network. I mean, welcome to Twitch. If you haven't said hi, say hi. We can talk here, but, like, maybe this is the way to find stuff. I don't know what the new social media is going to be. I've heard people talk about Mastodon. I've heard people talk about Mastodon for years. And so the idea that, like, there's how do you connect people and how do you bring people across? Like, what is it? I don't know. It's like this. I'm just ranting on, like, what is it? To be part of, like, these jurisdictions, like the extra things, and who gets to decide what goes across what border. I don't know. Now I'm ranting. Okay. The moral relevance of proximity, broadly understood. I got on because, yeah, your social media posts. Like, is that gonna prevent you from coming across a border? Like, seriously. I mean, there's the old story of when Girdle was trying to escape Europe, and he was kind of weird. Girdle was. For those who don't know, Girdle was perhaps the greatest mathematician of last century. And or logician, I don't know how you want to classify it. So he's in his asylum hearing, and, you know, the judge is there talking to him. He says, do you understand, like, the things in, like, U.S. government or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And Girdle starts explaining to him how the Constitution could be, you know, gerrymandered to create a fascist state. And the judge is like, you don't understand anything. Like, why are we letting this maniac in? And there were two people at Girdle's asylum hearing. One of them was Albert Einstein. And Albert Einstein goes to the judge, look, I'm Albert Einstein. This guy is not your problem. He just likes playing with, like, abstract structures or whatever. I don't know what Einstein said, but Einstein had to go be like, judge, please, like, this guy is not your problem. But, like, in that case, the testimony of Einstein is what saved Girdle's life, basically, until he died of anorexia many years later. But still, yeah, like, what is that? Like, was that Einstein's celebrity, or is just his vouching for him? Yeah, I don't know. Anywho, the moral relevance of proximity, broadly understood. The choice to circumvent states as choosers of potential admits, or as the sole agent justified in the exercising authority at the border, is manifest also in matching systems that Shahar observes to be in operation in early phases around the world. Matching systems help to match refugee arrivals to particular locales in need of the skills with which they travel, or with services that best match their needs. This is terrible. This just sounds like capitalism, like trying to fix things where, I mean, yes, if you can go find someone who needs a job and some place that needs someone that can work there, it's like, yeah, but that's not really, that's just capitalism. That's not really helping the people that need help. That's people who have skills that you can, like, put to use. She says these multivariable matching and relocation systems are not materially or practically dependent on territorial arrival. Such a system was adopted in Brazil, for example, in response to asylum seekers from Venezuela, which developed an innovative relocation program that moved Venezuelans from border towns to farther away spaces in Brazil. Brazilian border authorities asked recipients to specify priority criteria and create integration opportunities, and asked refugees for their preference for location as well. Matching systems can be adopted globally. Translating such interstate distribution mechanisms, which were modeled on the new UN Global Compacts, to different countries and regimes will require tremendous innovation, but is possible to conceive. Indeed, Talent Beyond Boundaries is just such a program in trial operations attempting to match skilled refugees with states that require their specific skills. Yeah, we've had this in the United States for a while. We've got visas that, you know, it's called, like, it's a job visa. If you have a skill, they'll give you a visa to come work in the United States. Like, basically, this is not a new idea. Now, if you want to do it much more sophisticated so you can help refugees who, like, can have, like, different skills too, but that's really hard. And frankly, if we could match refugees with like skills, then maybe someone could like actually give people good jobs here in the United States just the way it is. Now, maybe once we do it for the refugees, we can actually apply to the United States and then like get more people jobs that are better for them. But like, that just seems like, okay, if we could just do that, we should just do that anyway. It's like, yeah, someone get me a job where they pay me a lot of money and I'm very happy doing it. I don't think it's gonna happen, frankly. I just want to read my philosophy and broadcast on Twitch. I mean, if you want to pay me for that, but like, come on. Shahar defends these programs for the way in which they move beyond treating reaching territory as key to securing protection. She writes, this sort of approach does not elevate proximity to a pedestal. But I think this is the wrong way to think about what is going on here. Rather, what is going on is the deliberate attempt to create connections that mimic proximity and the moral and felt import that it carries. I agree with Shahar that physical proximity should not be elevated to a pedestal, and that the more flexible tools that Shahar defends as a way to protect the rights of movers are tremendously important and indeed would be game-changing if implemented. I believe as well, however, that we should be attentive to the many ways available manifested in these matching programs to cultivate a sense of proximity across borders and its potentially powerful role in generating among receiving states and citizens therein the sense that they possess an obligation to offer refugee seekers support. In other words, these algorithms that allow for matches work well to create a basis for believing there is a relationship between states and refugee seekers, or at least the groundwork for the development of such a relationship. To return to my earlier discussion of the PSRP in Canada, it has been well observed that for stranger sponsorships, where Canadian citizens with no connection to the specific refugees are matched with newcomers for the purposes of sponsorship, as opposed to say where Canadian citizens sponsor friends and family in refugee situations abroad, they are more successful where refugees and Canadians are able to connect in advance of arrival via WhatsApp or other apps that facilitate communication. These early forms of communication produce a sense of moral proximity that heightens among sponsors the sense that they have a strong duties towards the refugees they will welcome, and they develop among refugees a kind of motivation to collaborate with a new family to do the hard work of integration. Matching systems do the same. They identify talents and needs among refugees with states that have needs and services. In doing so, create a sense of proximity on both sides absent physical proximity. This suggestion, I think, should be understood as a friendly addition to Shahar's proposal. Yeah, because what it looks like is this author is trying to be nice, but what the original proposal was, like I was saying, it's basically an economic thing. You want to say, okay, these people need a job and you people need some help, and we can put you guys together and you should all just get along. The idea, though, instead, is what the author is saying here is like, look, you have to get people to make friends. Once you have friends, then you want to help them out and get them like up and running in your world. Then, like, sure, if they have skills, that's great, but you're going to create a more friendly proximity, like a friend group, as opposed to a like business arrangement. Because the problem with the business arrangement is as soon as that fails, like if it fails, you're not going to be happy with the person anymore and you're going to be angry. But a friend, on the other hand, yeah, one business opportunity could fail, but then you're still vested in your well-being. Okay, conclusion. As I said at the outset, Shahar's text is beautifully innovative. It encourages readers to think seriously about where immigration control is unjust and where it can be realistically be modified to the benefit of those who are most vulnerable. It is, in my view, a must-read for anyone looking for a new way to think about the constraints imposed by existing global migration management systems and how they can be undermined. Inspired by her prompts, I have proposed that the set of people who should rightfully be understood as playing a role in determining admissions should be expanded, and furthermore, that a state can and should act to create ties of moral proximity to encourage citizens to take a more active role in offering resettlement support to those most in need. Alright, so that was fun. The idea that there's a moral proximity that we could cultivate. So it's like, it could be part of our civic duty here in the U.S. to go, talk to immigrants or potential immigrants, asylum seekers. Maybe we have to go make friends with them. Maybe we need to make pen pals for people trying to come to the country. Maybe that's something we should be actively pursuing as citizens of the United States of America, so that we might be able to most find out who actually wants to be here and will be friends with the people here, like, in that way you will be vested in helping them out, as opposed to, just trying to get them a job, and when the job ends you kick them out because the visa's over. Yeah, of course. I feel like this is immediately going to lead to phishing, in the sense of like catfishing on the internet, where we're gonna have like pictures of like people acting one way just because they think this is how what Americans want to talk to, and of course like images of like pretty people and like very friendly, but then when they show up here they're not the pretty people we thought they were, and they're just very grumpy. But of course, like, that's always gonna be a problem, and people are gonna be liars. But like, there's ways around that in some sense. Like WhatsApp or whatever, actual video chats, actually dealing with people more than whatever. But of course, people are always going to lie. So it's not like that's foolproof. Any of this stuff can be gamed. Okay, fun paper. Fun for me at least. Hope y'all enjoyed it.